Eric, coming to you live from Victoria, Texas. And for just a few moments today, I want to discuss osteoporosis and osteopenia and the causes of which, and what you can do to actually reverse or even prevent these particular diseases. So let's start with what the construction of your bones are actually of. What are the components that make up bone? Now, most of us may think that it's actually minerals because they're hard, right? In fact, when it comes to the minerals, we'll probably think that the majority of the mineral in bone is actually calcium. After all, doctors tell us to take 1,200 milligrams of calcium with vitamin D in order to have strong, healthy bones. That's what kids need. That's why they need to drink milk, because of all the calcium and et cetera, that is in that type of food. In reality, bone is made up of several different things. And up to 70% of bone is made up of protein and fat. And we're talking about animal fats. We're talking about saturated fat, not this monounsaturated or unsaturated kinds of forms of fat. And then the remaining 30% is made up of mineral. That's the hardener of the bone. So without the minerals, then the protein and the fat would kind of make our bones all floppy like a wet Chinese noodle. And obviously, we're not going to have very strong bones with floppy bones. So that's why I have the minerals hardener. Now, speaking about minerals, there's actually 13 minerals that make up the composition of bone, and only one of which is calcium. And when we take into our body the over 1,200 milligrams of calcium, it does a couple of things. First, it disrupts the ratios, and it's very specific ratios to one another that all of these 13 minerals are in. So when we take 1,200 milligrams of calcium, it disrupts the entire spectrum of all these other minerals that are the composition of bone. The second thing it does is, because we're taking so much of this calcium and we have these higher serum calcium levels — serum means blood, so we have more calcium in the blood — well, eventually this calcium starts dropping out of the blood. Have you ever looked at a glass coffee pot, and at the bottom of it we see all these what we call hard water deposits? Well, that's the same thing that happens when we take calcium and we have this calcium in our blood. Eventually, the calcium has to drop out of suspension. And where does it drop out of suspension to? Well, the closest place, our arteries. In fact, that is the leading cause of plaquing and calcium deposits in the arteries. Taking calcium supplementation creates atherosclerosis in women and heart disease. So it does not help at all as far as preventing or reversing bone disease like osteoporosis and osteopenia to take in this different forms of calcium to the body. In fact, it's very damaging. So the question becomes, well, then what can we do in order to reverse or prevent osteoporosis, osteopenia? Well, some of the best things to take into the body would be things like bone broth or bone stock and gelatin. Now, so what is gelatin? I'm talking about real gelatin. Well, if you ever put a chicken into a crock pot or a pig's foot into a crock pot, and after you get done 10, 12 hours later, you see all this gelatinous material around the bone, that's gelatin. And that gelatin contains all of the things: fat, protein, minerals, everything that your bone needs in order to be healthy, and yes, possibly even reverse your osteoporosis conditions. Now, what is the real cause of these bone diseases? Well, the leading cause is actually hormonal imbalance. So even as we age, if we don't have a hysterectomy or we don't have any other kind of hormonal issue, just the aging process itself disrupts our endocrine hormonal system, our reproductive organs, and because of that dysfunction now, we can start having this osteoporosis, osteopenia. The other causes, even more common than that, are from food sources. And the top two offenders are sugar and then grain. The third offender is soda, because soda is very high in phosphoric acid, and phosphoric acid is an antagonist to calcium, and it forces your bone to give up the calcium. 99% of all calcium is stored in the bone, only 1% in the blood. So therefore, when we drink these sodas, we have the phosphoric acid. The body's going to compensate by taking the calcium out of our bone and putting it into the blood to deal with that phosphorus. And then what the sugar and grains do, they actually force the body to disperse the minerals, the other matrix of minerals in the bone, in order to deal with the sugar and the grains that we just ate. So we're actually forcing the body to practice nutritional triage, saying, oh my God, we have to deal with this situation, so we're going to move these minerals out of this bone in order to deal with what just has been eaten. So the way that we can replace the minerals and the different things that our bone need in order to be healthy is, first of all, we can get the minerals that our bones need through leafy green vegetables. Eggs are excellent. Clean meats, butter is a good source of fats. There's also supplements. I use Standard Process. It is a professional-only manufacturer, so you can only get Standard Process supplementation through health professionals. And the specific supplements that I use are Biost, basically that is ground up veal bone. So obviously it's going to contain all of the nutrients that your bone would need in order to be healthy. I also have used Biodent, Calcifood, and then along with that, once we get you on the proper diet, once we start supplementing your bones in the proper way, we can actually test if this particular protocol for you is being effective. And the way, or I should say one of the ways that we do that is through a urinary test called a DPD. And what that tests for is a certain bone marker. And if you have a high level of this particular bone metabolite, it means you are losing bone right now. And so we have to make an adjustment, or whatever you're doing is not getting to the cause and helping to reverse that particular condition. So we can make adjustments, or we can find, hey, what we're doing is exactly what you need to do. You need to keep on doing that exactly. So DPD test is very, very helpful. We do that here in the office. Now, in the closing note, let's talk very briefly about the medications that are quite common with treating osteoporosis through your medical doctor. Biphosphates, that is the leading class of drugs that you're given for osteoporosis, osteopenia. And let me tell you what these drugs do. They make the bone appear denser on bone scans. And let me explain how they do this briefly. So you have two types of cells as far as remodeling or regenerating your bone. One is called an osteoclast, and the second one is called an osteoblast. So the bone produces the osteoclast first. It has a lifespan of 21 days. And the osteoclast goes around and eating up all the old bone throughout your skeletal system. And then they die, and behind it come the osteoblasts. And the osteoblasts lay down new bone in all the pockets that these osteoclasts ate up of the old rotted, dead, degenerated bone. And so when you take the biphosphates, what happens is it suppresses, it stops, it blocks the manufacture of the osteoclasts. So now the old bone can't be metabolized. And so you only have the osteoblasts. And so the osteoblast cells come around into the bone, and they keep laying new bone on old bone and new bone on old bone. And it makes the bones over time exceedingly brittle, just like exactly a porcelain doll. And so what will happen is you're chewing your meal and boom, suddenly your lower jaw shatters. Or you have a minor fall, but you hit your hip and it cracks and shatters completely, and on go the complications. So again, these biphosphates, these drugs, oh, you gain blah, 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 1% of the bone that's working so wonderful. It's only making it appear denser because of the new bone over the old, dead, rotted bone. It has done nothing to restore the health of these bones. So we've gone over what are the causes of osteoporosis, how you can replenish your body, the dangers that these common leading drugs really have for your bones and your skeletal system. So I really hope you enjoyed this information. I hope you found it helpful. And again, I'm Leigh Brunellen, the Nutritional Maverick, signing off, and you have a great day.